Welcome back into the College Football Every Game on the Board podcast. The last section here, if you're looking on YouTube or the podcast, Sports Memo podcast, the first two sections are right below this. And now we got Jeff from Oskiem Sports. Welcome in, Jeff. How you feeling?
Good, Drew. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Excited to get your opinion here. We're talking 141, 142, TCU, Texas, all the way down to the end of the card, Southern Miss versus North Texas, rotation number 159, 160. So hopefully find more winners than losers here on this section of the podcast. Make sure to follow Jeff on Twitter at Oskiem Sports. We got TCU at Texas here, Jeff, 62.5 being the total. -11, that's the Longhorns laying in Austin.
Yeah, Drew. Talking about pouring salt into a wound, I had TCU as my 5% play last weekend as my college football game of the month, and they scored a touchdown in the final seconds of the game, and the line was TCU +3, +3.5, some people had 2.5, and they did not kick the extra point, Drew. They did not.
I know.
They didn't kick the extra point. I was actually at the casino with a friend of mine, and I was like, I saw the score, and they're down 3. And I said, they're going to kick the extra point, meaning it's like extra point, that'll be it. And then it said final on my phone. I said, you've got to be kidding me. So I guess there's not a requirement that they stay on to kick the extra point. I think it's required in the NFL. I guess it's not in college, but tough lesson to learn there. But as far as this game, TCU at Texas, let's quickly run this down. TCU outgained Iowa State. That was my game last week by 73 yards. They were better on the passing downs. They had a 50% third down success rate. They're 8-1 against the spread last night as road underdogs of 7 or more points. You look at this Texas team; they were completely dominated from the line of scrimmage against Texas Tech. They actually had to come back with a 15-point rally in the fourth quarter to pull this game out in overtime. I think this Texas team is ripe for an upset. I like TCU plus the points in this game.
So going back to the well, and Jeff, it was funny when that happened. I remember seeing that. I didn't bet the game. But is it up to the head coach that scored the touchdown to kick a meaningless extra point, or is it just there is no rule?
I don't think that's a good question. I don't think there's a rule because Gary Patterson just walked off the field and that was basically it. He had no interest in kicking the extra point. But I'm almost positive the NFL they require you to kick the extra point, regardless if it's a 20-point game, 10-point. It's meaningless, but they require you to do it. I believe. Okay. I'm not sure if it's a rule or if it's up to the head coach. In any event, it was a tough push to swallow on Saturday for sure.
Absolutely, man. That one would hurt. That's an expensive lesson. And guys, if anybody out there knows the answer to that and you're watching on YouTube, feel free to or please actually leave a comment below the WagerTalk YouTube or reach out on Twitter at Drew Martin Bets. Next, we're heading to the SEC here. 143, 144. The rotation numbers here, Jeff. 3:30 Eastern kick. I believe this is on CBS. The CBS 3:30 game. 51.5. We're talking Texas A&M at Alabama. So this is number 13, Texas A&M, number 2, Alabama, with the Crimson Tide laying 18 at home, 51 the total in Tuscaloosa.
Yeah, this game has Alabama written all over. You look at what Alabama did last week against Missouri, Drew. They held them to 113 yards in the first half before Nick Saban really called off the dogs in that game. The final score was grossly misleading. Alabama dominated from start to finish. You look at what they've done in this series. They've won 7 straight. Winning by an average margin of 21.7 points per game. You look at Nick Saban in home openers. He's 49-2 straight up in his last 51 home games. In the home openers, he's 21-2 straight up. And but he's 6-12 against the spread in home openers and 1-8 against the spread off a win. Regardless of that, my math likes Alabama in this game. I think this has blowout written all over it. You look at what Texas A&M, they really struggled against a relatively decent Vanderbilt defense, but this Texas A&M offense looked inept, especially in the red zone and crossing over to the opponent's 40-yard line. I don't even think they're going to get to that point against this Alabama stop unit. I would lay the points with the Tide.
Lay the points with the Tide. And do you think there's anything to Texas A&M kind of shelving some of their explosiveness on offense, at least in the first half against Vanderbilt, or no, not really?
I think that's fair, but if you look at what they did inside the 40-yard line, they were there. They averaged 2.8 yards per trip inside the 40-yard line. So that's an offensive issue that they need to fix. And I don't think Jimbo Fisher can do that before this game. I would lay the points, Drew.
Okay, looking towards Alabama. You can get them as low as -17 out there, guys. Staying in the SEC, Ole Miss versus Kentucky, two 0-1 teams here, both 0-1 straight up and ATS. Although, Jeff, not sure if you caught the Ole Miss game. I felt like the Rebels could have covered there against Florida, but it didn't work out their way. 61.5 being the total in Lexington, and we're seeing Kentucky laying 6 hosting Ole Miss.
Yeah, true. How about Lane Kiffin for the?
I thought he looked good.
Lane Kiffin comes in with his offense over 600 yards. I mean, his quarterback threw for 446 yards in the game. But you talk about a great offense. Their defense is just the opposite. They couldn't stop anything. However, Lane Kiffin, he is 13-7 against the spread in conference affairs off a loss. I think Mississippi is the way to look in this game. Kentucky. That was a very misleading final score against Auburn. They actually outgained Auburn in the game, and they only trailed 15-14 in the fourth quarter against the Tigers. This Kentucky team is very good. They had 3 turnovers and 2 were in the red zone. I think they had a fake punt they botched that resulted in a 27-yard touchdown for Auburn in that game, and they also had another turnover inside their own 40-yard line, resulted in an Auburn 24-yard touchdown. That is a misleading score. Kentucky played a lot better than the final score indicated. However, I think this Ole Miss team is ready to go under Lane Kiffin. He has them fired up. I like this offense. I would take the points. It's a lot of points with this Ole Miss team.
Yeah, and the market's knocked it down from a touchdown to, at some of the sharper books, quote unquote sharper, like Pinnacle, just showing 5.5 now. So, but you can get a 6 out there with the Ole Miss as we're talking right now. 147, 148 up next, 5 o'clock Eastern, 2 o'clock Pacific kick. Western Kentucky versus Middle Tennessee. We're seeing WKU laying 7 on the road, 54 the total in Murfreesboro.
This is obviously the game of the weekend, Drew, obviously. Western Kentucky and Middle Tennessee State, 2 programs going both in the wrong direction. If you look at what Tyson Hilton has done with Western Kentucky after his first season there, they were, I think, 9-4. The wheels have completely fallen off this season. They're 0-2. They lost to Louisville and Liberty. They've been outgained 974 yards to 530 yards. And they entered off a bye week after losing to Liberty as a 14.5-point home underdog. This Western Kentucky team is really struggling this year. Look at Middle Tennessee State. Doesn't get much better for them either. The Blue Raiders, they deserved to win last week against Texas San Antonio. That is true. They outgained Texas San Antonio 6.7 yards per play to 5.7 yards per play. But this team is really struggling as well. This game, I have no opinion. I would recommend staying away from it. My math likes Western Kentucky by 12.34 points. I'm not sure where that math is coming from. I have to trust the numbers. I'm going to shy away from this. Although I think it's 5.5, 6 points true in this game. It's kind of a red flag. It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, Western Kentucky now it's as high as 7-point favorites. Okay. So, yeah, that's where we're at. And we're talking with Jeff, Oskiem Sports. Find him at WagerTalk.com. Guys, some impressive numbers here. Plus 265 net profit. That's percent net profit produced all time at WagerTalk. That's a pretty high number there, Jeff. How long have you been with WagerTalk?
Since 2015. So that's what, almost 5 years, a little over 5 years with WagerTalk. So it's been great. It's like a family, as you know, Drew, coming over from I think you're with the Sports Memo and the merger and everything, so it's great to have you on board. But it's a great group of handicappers. I recommend everyone to go to the site WagerTalk.com and take a look at the group of professional handicappers that are there.
Yeah, sure. And I mean, I love the longer, stat lines. Like you said, since 2015, producing, it's kind of easy to do 5, 6-0, which, a lot of people do, and they should do. Right. But still, the longer term success is something to be really impressed by. So hats off to you. And guys, check them out. WagerTalk.com, 3-day, 7-day packages. All available. And also remember, $9 Monday and $2 Tuesday available at the website. We got next game up here in Conference USA, Jeff, 149-150 Charlotte, the 49ers at the FAU Owls down here in Boca Raton. We're seeing FAU -6 at home, 62.5 being the total.
Yeah, Drew, this Charlotte team I really like. Will Healy is, in my opinion, one of the best young head coaches in football. You look at what Charlotte did in the opening, their opening game this year. They nearly upset Appalachian State on the road. You look at what Will Healy did. He came in his first year and actually led the 49ers to a bowl game. They finished 7-6, and they landed in the Bahamas Bowl. That's quite an accomplishment for a Charlotte program that's relatively new and has struggled for many years. Florida Atlantic, this is something. Willie Taggart is back. And the Florida Atlantic Owls, they've had 4 games, I believe 4 games postponed and or canceled because of COVID-19. So this is actually the season opener for Willie Taggart and the Florida Atlantic team. You look at them, Taggart's 0-3 against the spread in season in home openers. And he is just not one of my favorite coaches. Nick Tronti is the starting quarterback for the Owls. The starting quarterback actually was dismissed in August. So Willie Taggart stepped into a very difficult situation here at Florida Atlantic. So this quarterback that starts for the Owls, he has thrown 51 passes in his collegiate career. I think it's a very difficult task. I like Charlotte plus the points in this game.
Yeah, I mean, Jeff, talking about, Willie Taggart, 0-3 in season openers, good stat there. And obviously he's had his struggles. If you're watching the show, everybody out there would know, his time at Florida State didn't go that well. And taking over for Lane Kiffin, which, you can say some positives and negatives for Lane Kiffin, but in the group of 5, it seems like for whatever reason, he can really coach them up. And offensively, now you're going to Taggart, who's had a bunch of issues. And especially what you said there with Chris Robinson, the starting quarterback there, he was pretty good. I mean, for Conference USA, talent-wise, he was really good. And I didn't know he was dismissed, but I did know that he's not playing this season. That's a huge drop-off to Tronti, who he's a decent player, but he's more of like just a come in on 3rd and short and run the ball, and then he would kind of get out of the game. So this is going to be a tough ask here for FAU.
Yeah, it's a tough ask for Taggart stepping into Kiffin's shoes here. He kind of left the cupboard dry, and I don't see Florida Atlantic having much success in this game or this year, actually.
Yeah, so I kind of like Charlotte plus the 6.5, and that's what you like too?
So. I do. I like Charlotte. Yep.
We got Georgia.
The game outright.
Oh, you sprinkle some on the money line, huh?
I will sprinkle some on the money line. I do like the 49ers. I'm kind of partial to Will Healy. I think he's a phenomenal coach. I like the 49ers in this game.
Cool. Good stuff. We got Sunbelt action up next. Georgia Southern versus Louisiana Monroe. Talk about game of the week, Jeff. This might be it. 3 touchdown favorites here. Georgia Southern actually minus 20 on the road in Monroe. 49 the total we got Georgia Southern versus Louisiana Monroe, the Warhawks.
I can't wait for this game, Drew. Like you said, it's a game of the weekend. This is phenomenal. You look at this Georgia Southern team. They really struggled early on. They had 33 players who tested positive for COVID-19, and they were sidelined for a few weeks. But now they're getting a lot of those players back. They're healthy, and I don't think the market has caught up to the Eagles here. I like Georgia Southern in this game. The reason is they almost upset Louisiana last week and with a healthy squad, and I don't think the market has really seen that or adjusted their power ratings because of that performance. They actually lost, I believe, on a 53-yard field goal in the final seconds of the game by a kicker for Louisiana who missed 2 or 3 field goals in the game already. He makes a 53-yard, incredible. In any event, Georgia Southern, they have a huge experience edge in this game. If you look at Louisiana Monroe, I don't have really much to say about them other than this is their 3rd straight home game, but they have lost 3 straight by 21 or more points. I can't see them being competitive against Georgia Southern. They can't stop the run. So I think Georgia Southern has a significant advantage in the trenches here. They will control the ball, move the ball, lay the points with the Eagles.
Yeah, good point on the market not really catching up to, change as a sports bettor and the players coming back from COVID. Yeah. So it might actually be and the market's telling us that, it opened up 15. Now it's all the way up to Georgia Southern minus 20. And it sounds like you don't think it's still enough there, Jeff.
Yeah.
But we got let's get a little bit more into the comfort zone here. Talking a big one. Auburn at Georgia. 7th ranked Auburn at 4th ranked Georgia here. In between the hedges, Sanford Stadium, Athens, Georgia on ESPN. 7:30 Eastern kick. Just 45 as the total here. Low total, Jeff, with 6.5 or 7. That's Georgia laying at home.
Yeah, Drew, this is going to be a great game. I'm not sure if Auburn looked bad last weekend or if Kentucky looked good last weekend. It's not clear to me, but I think Kentucky looked actually pretty good. I mean, but Auburn was outgained by over 100 yards by the Wildcats. They also benefited from a +3 turnover margin, and they still had to squeak out a win. And their last 2 touchdowns, I alluded to it earlier, came on a 27-yard fumble recovery and a 24-yard turnover as well. So Auburn could not sustain many drives in that game, which was very disappointing for Bo Nix, who I had somewhat high hopes for this year. I thought he would progress as a quarterback his sophomore year. I was not very impressed with what he did in the opener. You look at Georgia, obviously a phenomenal defense, but they actually struggled against Arkansas. I think they were leading 7-5. They were losing 7-5 or leading 7-5 at halftime or something like that. Their offense looks suspect. But I'm not sure if you saw this, Drew, but USC transfer JT Daniels is now available for this game. And the head coach has not indicated who is going to start or whether or not JT Daniels will see the field at all. But I think that would be a boost for the Bulldogs if he gets in there. I don't have an opinion on this game at this time. I'm not sure if you do. It looks like a lot of points for Auburn, even though they didn't look very good the opening game. You can't overreact to short-term results, as you know.
Yeah, and guys, welcome in on the chat box here at WagerTalk YouTube. Johnny Outlaw saying my dog's going to bite the Tigers. I mean, we'll see, Johnny. and one thing I wanted to ask you, kind of a back question here as we end it, but my opinion on Auburn, talent-wise, I thought it was there, but you're right. The turnovers and the way they scored, I have question marks going up against Kentucky. But one of the questions I had about the Auburn defense coming into this, because I was looking for Bo Nix to take a step up. We've seen Gus Malzahn do this before after his first season as the starting quarterback. Talking about Bo Nix, that's usually a big step up for a quarterback. So I think that still is yet to be seen offensively. But defensively, I thought Auburn kind of held their own against Kentucky, but I'm not so sure how much that is, Kentucky offense maybe not being that explosive. They won 8 games with a wide receiver at the quarterback position last year. Now they go back to their quarterback that, to tell you the truth, Jeff, wasn't all that great when he was the starting quarterback for Kentucky, at the beginning of last year and the year before. So I do think there's question marks there. It's just, going up against the Georgia defense, you can't really count on Auburn to score a lot of points. But I do think the Auburn defense will hold Georgia's offense at bay as well.
No, I agree with you. And I think the one thing that Auburn did well last week, one of the few things they did was they created a bunch of chunk plays on offense. If you look at, they had 37% of the passes went for 10+ yards, and 19% of their passes traveled and went for at least 20 yards or more. So the chunk plays were critical to Auburn's victory last week against Kentucky. I'm not sure they had that same success against this Georgia defense. We'll soon find out. But again, I'm staying on the sidelines in this game at this point unless the market moves Auburn back up to 7 or 7.5. Then I might be a buyer on the Tigers.
Yeah, and to second that, I believe that Georgia's defense over the last 2 years, I read a stat where actually they let up like one of the least amount of chunk plays in all of college football, just because they have so much talent in the defensive backfield that it's tough to get good plays off against them. But good stuff there, Jeff, in the breakdown. Yeah, of Deep South's oldest rivalry, Auburn versus Georgia Saturday night. We got LSU at Vanderbilt up next, 50 being the total in Nashville. LSU, losing outright week 1 after one of the better seasons of my lifetime in college football from LSU and Coach O last week. So now what are we asking them to do? Win by 3 touchdowns on the road here. But heck, it's 2020. Yeah. We've seen wilder things, Jeff.
Yeah, I think if I recall correctly, last year you actually liked Mississippi State in this game against LSU. You were high on Mike Leach.
Yeah,
I'm not sure if you released that as an official play, but how about Mike Leach in the offense? I guess he wasn't kidding when he said it takes 3 days to learn his offensive system, because it was incredible what the Bulldogs did last week. And in terms of LSU, I guess it really does matter that they're missing 19 players. And then it got even worse right before kickoff. The late scratch, their starting cornerback was sick, and he was scratched. So they were dealing with a depleted secondary going up against Mike Leach's air raid offense. It was just a recipe for disaster. I think LSU was exploited, and I think they're going to struggle this year in the SEC. I was actually surprised at how badly they struggled. Vanderbilt, they're actually better than I thought from their opening game, but they averaged only 1.7 points per possession inside Texas A&M's 40, and I'm still not convinced about their defense. They lost a whole host of players in the offseason by either injuries or opt-outs, especially the linebacking unit. If anything, well, I'm not going to touch this game. I have no opinion on it, but LSU looked really bad against Mississippi State, being outgained by 200 yards. And Mississippi State, they had 4 turnovers. LSU recovered 4 turnovers, and they could not capitalize on that. And they still lost by double digits at home. So I'm not touching this game. If anything, I would lean to the dog and the points.
Okay, speaking of Mississippi State, we're heading to Starkville for the next matchup here, 7:30 Eastern kick on SEC Network. We got 69 being the total, with Mississippi State laying 17.5 at home, hosting Arkansas, which interestingly enough, 0-1, but 1-0 ATS, Jeff, covering that big number.
Yeah, Arkansas actually, now they've lost 20 straight SEC games after last week's loss. But like I said earlier, they were actually leading Georgia 7-5 at halftime. That was a pretty impressive start before Georgia woke up and walked away with the win. Mississippi State, and like as we talked about Mike Leach, he is excited about this game because he gets one of the least experienced secondaries in college football. With Arkansas, they also have a new head coach, new defensive coordinator. They're learning a new system on the defensive side of the ball. So it's going to be a tough task for this Arkansas Razorback team to face Mike Leach in an offense that the SEC is not familiar with whatsoever at the air raid. So I think Mississippi State is going to roll in this game. I will say that Mike Leach is one of the most profitable college coaches in the nation. He's 15-3 straight up and 8-2-1 against the spread in home openers. He's also 57-37 against the spread in his career at home. I think Mike Leach and the Bulldogs put on a show for the home fans and run away with this game.
So he's 57-37 ATS at home in his career. Do you think that there's, I love it when these trends, you can kind of put a fundamental reason behind it. Do you actually think he's kind of playing to the crowd in terms of wanting to punch in more touchdowns, and that's why it is, or is this just by happen chance?
I don't think he's known for taking his foot off the pedal. I think he just he keeps throwing it, and it doesn't surprise me that stat because his offense is always potent, and they always have the capability of covering numbers. Even when he was at Washington State, when they were when they were getting points, he was a covering machine.
Yeah, so 8-2-1 in home openers and 57-37 ATS at home. So those are some great stats there, Jeff, and people loving it at home. Guys, if you're watching on the Wager Talk YouTube channel, please give us a thumbs up. If you're watching on replay, feel free to leave a reply below. Love reading those if you're liking the content, and if not, let us know why as well. And also wherever you're downloading your podcast at. Remember, Sports Memo podcast each and every week, doing NFL every game on the board and college football every game on the board podcast. We got last game here to finish off the week 5 college football card. Southern Miss at North Texas. We see North Texas -1 in the hook in Denton, 71.5 being the total.
My only advice is to stay away from these two teams because they are awful, and I can't figure them out because I think Southern Mississippi, has quit on the year. I mean, they lose their week 1 game, their head coach resigns. And then last week, they've lost 3 straight, and they failed to cover the number, and they were actually shut out 35-3 in the second half of last week's game against Tulane. I think they've waved the white flag in the season. I don't see Southern Mississippi digging deep and trying to salvage the 2020 campaign. But on the flip side, you look at North Texas, they're 3-15-2 their last 20 games. They failed to cover the Vegas number by 8.5 points per game. The only bright spot for North Texas is at home. They've won 16 of their last 20 home games. So if anything, I would lean with a mean green here at home, but I just don't trust either team. I certainly would not put any money on Southern Miss. Let's put it that way, Drew, because I really think these kids have quit after losing their head coach in week 1 when he resigns. And then what they did in the second half last week at Tulane really spoke volumes to me, and with where the locker room is. I think they're very disenchanted.
All right, Jeff, bringing the heat here with the good stats. And guys, he's got some good stats over the long term with some winners, 265% net profit produced since 2015 at WagerTalk. Also 5%ers. He's on a really good run here, both NCAA and NFL, 10-3 NCAA 5% run here at WagerTalk. And of course, 5% being the highest rated plays on the board, WagerTalk.com. So, Jeff, anything you want to throw out there before we shut this down?
No, I just appreciate you having me on, Drew. I know you're busy, the hardest working guy in Vegas. I know that for sure. I think you're on every channel and every radio program that I turn on. So congratulations with your success, and thanks again for having me on.
Hey, Jeff, always good having you. Mainstay here on the Every Game on the Board. He'll be back next week, guys. Thanks for joining us. Hopefully you like the podcast, the simulcast on the Wager Talk YouTube channel. And best of luck with your bets out there, guys. So thanks.